and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, with the City of Hampton's Communications and Marketing Department. And today, as school is back in session and we are ready to go, we're going to talk about parents as partners, how to work with your school to be a part of your child's education. My guest is our family and relationships expert, Alvean Lyons. Welcome back.
Good morning.
I can't believe
it's September.
I know, it's
almost.
crazy. How does that happen?
I mean, the summer flies by and you find yourself really in that like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this all together. My kids have to go back to school. All these bad habits we started during the summertime, I've got to kick all of these before they start class in just a couple of days. So we're all on the hustle. All of us who have little people at home still are in that same place.
Yes. I don't this year, but I understand and appreciate. And I think it's a hard thing to do, to make sure at the beginning of the school year that you get off on the right foot, that you are not the uninvolved parent and that you are not the helicopter parent, because I know a lot of teachers and there are parents who overdo this.
Absolutely.
So how do we find that middle ground?
And that balance is perfect that you're talking about, because you don't ever want to underparent and you don't want to overparent. You know, kids really flourish the most right in the middle of those two spaces. So it really is about figuring out what's necessary and what's important versus what isn't really. So we like to look at it in terms of ABCs. You know, I always like things. I'm lovers of teachers. I love my teachers and I love my counselors. So I really try to find things that are simple for parents to remember. So I want to start first with A. Ask questions. When we're getting ready to go back to school, there are so many things, especially now with the advent of technology in the middle schools and in some of the elementary schools. They got iPads this year.
Absolutely.
So, which is such a fantastic initiative from the city. But it certainly adds a different lens of complexity for people who are not tech savvy. So as you're thinking about how do I support my child while he or she is at school, you may have questions also. But the thing we do as parents all the time is think that we need to know everything. So we feel funny about asking, which is exactly what our kids do in class.
Right.
They'll not know, but they don't want to be the person to interrupt the class, to slow things down, to seem like the uninformed one. So they avoid asking the question. But unfortunately, what that does is handicap us. So even as adults, we have to be okay with asking questions. Our teachers are really all right with it. They would much rather us ask than not ask. And then we find ourselves in a situation where our kids need to do things and we can't support them in the process at home. So, but it really does begin in the school experience. It really does begin with the communication with our teachers. So don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
The second thing, you have to be present. That's our B. When you're talking about the over or under, overdoing it is you're there every single day, your kid's a middle schooler, but you're practically feeding them lunch in the cafeteria. That's too much.
Right.
So,
if you're volunteering in general, that's great.
Different.
But
Absolutely.
if you're hovering over your child,
absolutely,
they're not interacting with other kids.
They're not having the full experience.
Right.
And we want them to have the full social experience. They have to make mistakes. It's okay if they make mistakes. They have to navigate this world, and we talk about it in terms of the C, socially, emotionally, academically. Every one of us as parents want to make sure that our kids are able to stay afloat, function really well, and be successful. But there are three elements to that that take place in the school system every day. And so if we're over-parenting, if we're helicopter parenting, as you call it, hovering over our kids, they don't get a chance to flex any of those parts of who they are. And their capacity is limited by that. So we don't want to
And by the
overdo
time they're
it.
on their own, they don't know how to
goodness.
do it because you fought all their battles for
them. And the truth is they have to. It's like riding the bike. They've got to fall off. They've got to skin their knees. You can't protect them from everything. But simultaneously, you don't want to be so uninvolved that they don't know that they have support when they need it.
Right, right.
So we definitely want to make sure that we find that space in between. But the being present really is about the fact that your teachers need to know that you care about your kid. The reality is that teachers respond to parents who are actively involved in the process. It's not that they don't love every child or want success for every child, but there is a difference in perception of parents who are involved in the process and parents who are totally uninvolved in the process.
Right, because they'll work with a parent if a parent will work with them, but if they know the parent is uninvolved, they'll try something different, and then you're out of that loop.
Absolutely. And it breeds conflict, unnecessary conflict also, because you can't expect someone to know what your expectations are for this partnership if you're not actually a part of it. You've got to have a conversation. Teachers are brilliant, but they're not mind readers. And while I understand that we all expect the very best teacher and to treat our kids just perfectly, the reality is that everybody's human. We have different personalities. We approach things in different ways. None of our teachers are looking for our kids to fail. Every teacher wants your kid to do well, but they also need to know that you're going to help them in the process, because they have your kids for 6 to 7 hours during the day. That means there are literally 18 other hours that they're not with your kid. So it's important that during those other 17, 18, you are part of the process of making sure that what it is that's happening in the school system is being reinforced at home. And if there's something happening at the school level that is not what you want, you're the one who has to be a part of the conversation where that's concerned. You are your child's best advocate. So we have to be present. We have to show up. Parent-teacher conferences, be there. They need to talk to you.
Back to school night for sure.
Absolutely, which is literally like happening. And then open house, go to open house. All of those things that are taking place, all of those opportunities to connect, don't waste them.
And PTA, you know, it's one of those statistics where when kids are in elementary school, PTA membership is pretty good, but it tapers off in middle and high school.
Which is really unfortunate, because our kids tend to need us more, but in different kinds of ways. A lot of us assume that because our kids are not little anymore, that they can take care of it, they're on their own, they can go do it. But they're just navigating through different parts of their development. There's no time during your child's younger years, and I mean from birth to 18, that they don't need you. They just need you in different ways during the process. So don't become uninvolved just because your kids are getting older. Just be involved differently.
Okay.
So, and then finally, C, make sure that there is current contact information. All too often, teachers want to reach out but can't find us. Whether we're better with email or better with texting or better with the phone call, whatever the method is that's most effective to reach you, make sure your teachers have a way of doing that. We don't want to have a situation where there's something that could have been prevented, something that could have been intervened in, some information that you really should have known that you don't because the teachers don't know how to reach you. We have to check our voicemails. We have to make sure we check our emails, respond to the text message. We've got to make sure that the bridge and the lines of communication stay open in order to make sure that partnership works. It cannot take place if we're not both actively a part of the process.
Right, and I think teachers in particular have limited opportunities to get to the phone sometimes. So if they call you on their free bell, you know, you kind of have to be able to answer or to respond. But a lot of times now email has sort of taken that place because they can do it when they can reach, you know, can access it, and we can do it when we can listen. So it is a really helpful tool for people who have email.
Of course, and the nice thing about email is that it does provide a paper trail. So you know, okay, what did we cover last time? What is it that I said I was going to do, the action items? What did the teacher said they were going to do? You know, all of those things. And it's not really about accountability and that kind of the check and balance. I'm trying to make sure you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not to be perceived that way, but rather it reminds both of us of what it is that we're supposed to be doing in the process. And you can't be adversaries and allies at the same time. So you can't go in with the mindset that, you know, I'm going to have to make sure this happens for my child, and I'm going to make sure that this teacher understands. We have to be partners. And in order to do that, we have to create an environment for that to be possible. Let the teachers know that you want to help them do a great job with your kid. Let them know that you are not there to critique every single thing that they do and don't do, right or wrong. They are imperfect, and it's okay that they're imperfect. But if we're taking our responsibility very seriously as parents, then we also understand that it is not their job to both raise and educate our children. We have to do the raising part. They're going to do the education part, and we're going to do the reinforcement part. But we all have to know what our job is. And to suggest in any way that any one of us could exit that responsibility and our child be successful is totally disingenuous. We've got to do this thing together. It really is its own little marriage. We're a family. And as much as we don't think about it that way, it's the best way to orient if you really want to do a good job with your kids.
Now, I have, knowing a lot of teachers, heard some horror stories about the parents that go too far, the demanding to change a grade, the asking for a lot of special favors. I mean, how do you, teachers aren't perfect, but I'm sorry, parents, neither's your child. Right? Your little angel is not always a little angel. Mine isn't either.
Right.
So how do you, what advice do you have from parents who do maybe step over that line a little bit?
Well, it really is about a way of approaching things. Most of what's going to happen in life is going to have to do with your perspective and your approach about the process. So remembering that the same way that your kid gets on your nerves at home, they get on the teacher's nerves at school. It happens. And the teachers may care about our kids, but they're not in love with every child. They're just not. And it's okay.
Right.
It really is okay. If you had 30 kids during one day, all day long,
and
you
30
would not
is just
love them
elementary
all.
school. You get
exactly.
to middle
When
school
you get to
or
middle
high
school and high
they've got
school.
150 kids
Absolutely.
at least.
And there's no way to create that same kind of bond with every child. So they're not going to feel the same about every child. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are kids they're naturally going to connect with, and there are kids that they may not for various reasons. So we have to understand the human factor where our teachers are concerned. Secondarily, we have to understand the imperfection factor where our kids are concerned. We know who they are at home. In a lot of ways, they are that at school. And in some ways, they can behave in ways that we wouldn't expect them to behave at school because they do not have those same boundaries that we may provide at home.
Right.
So
they may behave better, they may not.
They may not. And it could go either way.
It can,
because the truth is there are some kids who are fantastic at school and they're very different at home. So I mean, like, you can get either of those scenarios, but the reality is we have to be aware that they both exist. So when a teacher says that something may have happened where your child is concerned, don't immediately assume that the teacher is out to get your kid. That may not be the situation at all.
Right.
Listen. Try to be as objective as you possibly can. Have the conversation with your kid. I'm not saying don't believe your child. I'm saying consider both angles before you make a decision. And whatever decision you ultimately make sure that it takes into account both sides. Okay. If both sides were true, what would be the most effective thing to do? So we have to consider the balance when we're navigating as parents. Especially because it creates, when parents take the position that it's always the teachers that's wrong, you can guarantee that you're going to create an adversarial situation.
Right, and that does not do your child as
any
much good.
favors.
It really doesn't.
And I say to parents all the time, you don't want to write a check that your child has to cash. Because that's what happens. When we behave a particular way at the adult level, our kids are the ones who end up having to cash that check that we wrote. So you want to make it as positive an experience as you possibly can because you're setting up an atmosphere for your child. So if you have a great kid, your great kid has even better experiences. If you have a tough kid, you have a teacher who feels like she's a partner or he's a partner in the process with you, and they may be a great deal more considerate and lenient where your child is concerned, not ignoring what happens, but just understanding contextually who the child is and what they may be going through. And it changes their ability to connect and even sometimes their patience levels. So, I mean, it really is about how we approach the situation and the perspective we have as parents.
Okay. Well, the other thing I would say is use the tools that the school system gives you. So you may not have to email or call the teacher to find out an answer because it may be in the agenda. It may be written down. It may be you can go online and check the grades and see how your kid is doing without always having to ask. So the more you know when you have that conversation, the less time it takes, the easier you are on both of you. Because teachers are very busy, we're very busy.
Absolutely. And being informed makes a huge difference. You know, it's one thing to believe that your kids are going to tell you everything. that has happened in class.
Yeah, that's a problem.
They may not have mentioned that they were late 3 times this week and you knew nothing about it. But the advent of some of the technology that Hampton City Schools has put into effect gives us the opportunity to find out some of that information. You know, was your kid absent and you didn't know your child was absent, especially when we're talking about at the high school level? Did they skip a class that you didn't know about?
That happens.
It happens. I mean, our kids are still figuring out who they are and they make decisions that we may not be thrilled about. But being informed about, why did he get that grade? Well, is it because he missed 3 assignments during the class that he was supposed to be present for that you didn't know he was at? Checking all of that information, being as informed as you can, makes for a very different conversation than the one where you assume everything worked out the way your child said, and it turns out that's not exactly how it happened. So we have to be as plugged in as we possibly can, and you and I have talked about that on many shows. Plugging in as a parent makes a world of a difference for the outcome for your kids. So yes, I totally agree. And then remembering at the elementary level in particular, we have the family engagement specialists. So if you don't necessarily have the bridge to the school or don't necessarily know where to begin, there are people that are there that are just about that process, making those connections for you. And I've worked with the family engagement specialists for years, and they are so committed to making sure that the parents feel like you are welcome here. We want you to be a part of the process, and we want to make sure that your kids do well. So don't waste your resources. You have them.
That's
but
right.
Sometimes
Don't forget
it means,
about that. You have guidance counselors,
absolutely.
You have assistant principals usually. There are other people
absolutely.
At the school system who will support.
It's very true. And we need to make use of those things. Unfortunately, our schools don't have the ability to come to our house and hand them to us always. So it does mean
we have to rummage through the backpack.
Right? And we have to make the initiative. You know, it does happen that way sometimes. And it just comes with the territory. And everybody has to understand that we're all going to have to do some work to make this thing turn out the best possible way it can.
Okay, well, thank you. Now I'm going to try to review, and I'll mess them up. But so ABCs, this should be simple. Ask questions.
Always ask questions. Don't be afraid to.
Because, yeah, you don't get information if you don't ask.
And there's no
if you
stupid
don't understand,
question.
Yeah, and it also sets a great example for the kids.
Absolutely.
Be present.
Absolutely.
So you do have to show up at the conferences, and you might have to request a conference. You know, they have those conference days set aside. So go to the meetings, go to the open houses, go to the conferences.
Absolutely.
Okay, here's where I fall apart. What's C?
C, current contact.
Current contact.
We have to make sure that our teachers can reach us.
And that's important. And I know you fill out 1,000,000 forms, but I always fill it out again in the classroom because sometimes the paperwork doesn't get to the teacher. Or it's, you know, it just makes it easier if you've handed that information to the teacher. They can pull it out easier than if they have to go to the office and get it.
It never hurts for you to just send an early email to say, hey, teacher so-and-so, this is Mrs. or Mr. so-and-so. I'm looking forward to an excellent year together. Don't hesitate to reach me at A, B, and C.
Right.
It never hurts to make it personal, and it just shows some great initiative.
And make it easy. They can like click on it and save it.
Exactly.
You know, it's easier for everybody.
Make it easy for them to be supporters of your kid.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Robin.
So we've learned today how to be a better partner in our child's education. We will come back and talk about what you need to do at home to support your child's education. But for now, think about those ABCs because, you know, if your kid's in school, you're kind of in school too. Thanks for watching.